Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to another episode of DD Geopolitics live stream. I am your host, Sarah, with my other host, John. I'm back with our favorite Hawaiian shirt wearing analyst, Larry C. Johnson. How are you this morning, Larry?
I am well. I'm warm.
Great.
That's the good thing.
Are you warming up to the idea of nuclear winter?
Well, actually, I think we may have dodged a bullet uh, thanks to Russia's technological development. When they fired that Oreshnik missile last Thursday, they opened up an alternative to nuclear war and basically showed the United States and Western Europe something that none of us have seen. And there's now an alternative. And what do I mean by that? Let's say that plant that they hit in Dnipropetrovsk, the Yuzhmash plant, it's this massive Soviet era defense facility, several layers underground, a mile long and a mile wide. It's a big place. In the past, prior to last Thursday, if you wanted to hit it, you'd have to use a tactical nuke. If you wanted to really wipe it out, you'd use a tactical nuke. Problem with the tactical nuke is it's got this terrible blast effect, causes lots of collateral damage, going to kill a lot of civilians, going to leave radiation scattered, going to cause some hurricane force winds in the immediate area, knock buildings down. What the Russians unveiled last week is this hypersonic MIRV missile. A MIRV has multiple warheads that are independently targeted on the re-entry. So MIRV, multiple independent re-entry vehicle. And it's MARV. We can't talk DOD stuff without having acronyms. MARV, M-A-R-V. That is maneuverable re-entry vehicle. So not only has this thing got, multiples, they're maneuverable, and they're traveling upwards of 10 Mach, which is really fast. So fast that it looks like a lightning bolt flashing to the ground when you see it. The nice thing about it is what Russia put on display last Thursday was a kinetic weapon. I mean, it's just the damage and destruction it's causing is just by the force of the impact. It's not radioactive. There wasn't any explosive attached to it. They can attach explosives if they want. But best of all, it was precise. It's almost like you had a bullet that behaved like a nuclear weapon, except it didn't give off the radioactivity explosion, and you fire it out of a sniper's rifle. And the best part of this was when Putin was describing this, and I used this in my post the other day at Sonar 21. You two are too young to have remembered the movie Billy Jack when it came out in 1973. But this movie featured an actor by the name of Tom Laughlin. He was half Indian, half gringo, and he was fighting against all these corrupt cowboys, I guess you'd call them, up in South Dakota who were persecuting the Indians. And at one point, he's confronted by the bad guy. And as he's standing there barefoot, he says, "You know what? I'm going to take this right foot here, and I'm going to put it on, whop you on that side of your face, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it." The bad guy goes, "Really?" And Billy Jack goes, "Really?" And then whomp, kicks him upside the head. That's what Vladimir Putin did last week. He goes, "We got this missile. You can't stop it. We can hit whatever we want within 3,500 miles of here. So what we're going to do is, if you don't stop firing your ATACMS, Storm Shadow, and Scalp missiles into Russia, we're going to retaliate. And when we retaliate, we're going to hit a military target. We're going to tell you what that target is. We're going to give you fair warning so you can clear your people out, because we don't want to kill civilians. And then we're going to hit it and destroy it, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop it." Welcome to the new world, boys and girls. That was That's a game changer. With that game changer, in a way, nuclear weapons get taken off the table because now the United States doesn't have anything it can counter that with except nukes. And if they go the nuclear route, we're all dead.
Well, the United States hasn't been able to take the signals that Russia has been providing and actually respond in in any kind of rational and reasonable way. So, that's where my head goes. And we had Pepe Escobar on yesterday, and we were talking about this. By the way, I always appreciate all of your acronyms. I think the last time that we were talking about CETO, and we were talking about all of the history of NATO and Nazi infiltration in NATO. So now we're taking it to the modern times, and you're providing us a number of acronyms and modern weaponry. So it's always appreciated. But my question is, one of my concerns is that the West just does not seem to take signals very well. And even with this new force that Vladimir Putin has demonstrated, there is still, it seems like, a willingness from the West to use its missile systems in Ukraine. I mean, we saw ATACMS used after Putin had displayed the Oreshnik capabilities. So what's your expectation, if you have one, from how the West will continue to respond and what their involvement will be like in Ukraine moving forward?
I'm afraid the West is going to have to suffer the equivalent of a big punch in the nose or a club over the head before it wakes up out of its slumber. We continue, our leaders, both Republican and Democrat, continue to hold an image of Russia that's false. They see Russia as weak. They see Putin as indecisive, as full of hot air, somebody who's bluffing, that the Russian army is incompetent, that the Russian army is suffered catastrophic losses. Therefore, it has to use North Korean troops because it's in such desperate straits. In the wonderful intro that you guys have, they go back to the head of the European Council saying that the Russians are using computer chips from washing machines and refrigerators in order to keep their missiles going. So we've got this complete disconnect from reality, and nobody, the people that try to stand up and talk about it in a sane, rational fashion, like Tulsi Gabbard, are immediately labeled as Putin spokespeople, puppets of Putin. You're just repeating Russian talking points. So it is, and really this is not unusual. I was talking with my wife the other night. She's a hospice nurse. She goes and deals with patients who are at the end of their life, and she had a new nurse that was supposed to do the job. And basically their priority is to get the patient comfortable so that they can pass in peace without agonizing, feeling like they're suffocating. And this new nurse couldn't make the decision. She had got it locked into her mind that there was a certain way that this could be, and that she couldn't see anything else. And my wife's really good at explaining things to folks, but after 2 hours, my wife couldn't break through. Now, that's an exact parallel with what we're seeing from the likes of Biden and Starmer in the UK and Macron in France. They have locked themselves into this image, vision, ideology with respect to Russia, that they can't accept the fact that Russia is the strongest military power in the world today, hands down. United States is not. UK and France certainly are not. And yet we keep indulging this fantasy that, we're the best, we're the toughest, we're the top of the heap. We're not. So I'm afraid the only thing that gets you out of that, it's like a drug addict. They got to crash. They got to hit rock bottom before they decide, I don't want to live like this anymore. I'd like to live.
Well, I have one more follow-up on Russia and Ukraine, and just staying on the subject of nuclear war, because we've seen multiple times the Russians signal, hey, this possibility of nuclear war is serious, right? From the Russian side, they take it as something that's serious. You described how we have an off ramp now, and there's a path to escalation which doesn't involve nukes. But at the same time, and so I agree with this kind of notion that we shouldn't be alarmist about nuclear war, just talking about nuclear
right,
war.
Right.
But at the same time, we see this opposite track that's being taken from much of the mainstream media. Like I saw an article from the New York Post today directed at the Trump administration saying, Trump administration, don't worry about nuclear war. Don't worry about World War III. It's not really going to happen. And this seems to be kind of the common narrative, to get back to the point that we were just talking about from our mainstream media and political elites, that Russia isn't that serious. It's not going to get that serious. And so what's motivating this?
So it's called confirmation bias. Once you get in your mind certain facts, certain beliefs, then you're unable to see the world any other way. And so you always look for that confirmation. I'll give you an example. You've heard frequently in the West, Russia's failing in Ukraine because it's been almost 3 years and they can't beat the Ukrainians. And so I always go, okay, time out. Number one, Russia's been fighting an army that's a peer army that's not just on its own. It's backed fully by NATO. It's a de facto NATO army. It's operating with NATO supplies, NATO funding, NATO ammunition, and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance data across the board. And during that time, Russia's inflicted catastrophic casualties on the Ukrainians and is now pushing across Ukraine in a way that the Ukrainians can't stop. In contrast, the United States, supposedly the mightiest army in the world, the biggest, the best, and the baddest, fought 18 years in Afghanistan and got its ass kicked, had to flee. And we weren't fighting against the pure army. We're fighting against goat herders with AK-47s, with mortars. They didn't have fixed-wing aircraft. They didn't have artillery. They didn't have tanks. So I don't want to hear anybody in the West say a damn thing about Russia and its lack of progress. Look in the mirror. We failed in Iraq. We failed in Afghanistan, and we pretend that we're in a position to offer advice to these people? Shut up. So, my point in this rant is we fail to take into account the reality of what Russia is. They've got hypersonic missiles. We don't. I know one of the guys who's involved, one of the project managers for the hypersonic missile program. Swear to God, 2 years ago, we're in this phone meeting, and he said, yeah, we think we're going to have the hypersonic up and ready to go in 3 months. We're 2 years later, still not operating, still not deployable. And that's just one. The Russians have multiple. They have 3 or 4 different varieties. And we're not even in the ballgame. So the United States is caught, along with the rest of the West, imagining what we were years ago. We're no longer that. We're like that, your most popular high school linebacker, the guy who's the best athlete. Yeah, when he was 18, he was in great shape. But now he's 58, he's fat, he's, 60 pounds overweight and hasn't done a wind sprint in years. That's where we are in the United States.
Like the Ottoman Empire, World War I, the old sick man. Before we move on in topics, what will the Oreshnik strike number 2 look like, since Ukraine is obviously not being deterred from attacking Russia?
They may hit the Rheinmetall factory. If I was going to pick a target, the Rheinmetall factory that's in western Ukraine, that way it would be quite visible to the West. They didn't really get to see the one in Dnipropetrovsk. I suspect this one will be accompanied by, they'll put some explosives on those MIRV warheads. But
Nice.
It's going to happen within the next 2 or 3 days. We saw last night, Russia issued a NOTAM, notice to all airmen, that goes through the 30th. So today's the 27th. So It'll happen today, tomorrow, Friday, or Saturday, but it's going to happen.
Larry, with the good news for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, things are heating up in Russia, Ukraine. I guess things are trying to cool down in the Levant. I'm not sure. Maybe we can try to untangle this mess. We've got a ceasefire that went into effect today, 4:00 a.m. local time. Israelis have already begun arresting people on the streets that have broken the curfew that they've imposed. The two sides obviously exchanged fire. What are your thoughts about this ceasefire and Biden sort of taking credit and kind of swooping in as the hero? And I'm just, the whole thing is very shaky to me.
Yeah, it's kabuki theater. It's all it doesn't really mean what they say that it means. Israel was losing in this war of attrition in Lebanon, even though it was killing Lebanese civilians right and left with bombardments from the air. On the ground, it was getting beat. The Hezbollah was blowing up tanks, killing and wounding Israeli soldiers. And it was, I make a point every day. I call the media, the Israeli media, Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, Ynet News, and Haaretz. And over the course of the last 2 months, you really wouldn't know there was a war going on in southern Lebanon. They don't report on it. It's like they send Helen Keller out to do the reporting, deaf, dumb, and blind. No real news. Whereas if you checked out the Hezbollah-friendly Telegram channels and other social media, they were reporting the different attacks, how many rockets launched, strikes, etc. We do pick up some information here and there, sort of indirectly out of Israel. They're digging 600 new graves at this military cemetery, for example. Oh, that's interesting. They haven't reported on 600 deaths, but by God, they're going to be burying 600 more people. So this ceasefire is a way to get Israel's rear end out of a bind. Just as happened in 2006, Israel was not able to militarily defeat Hezbollah or push them out of southern Lebanon. So now it's trying to, they came up with this face-saving device, except Bibi blaming it on Joe Biden. Biden's taking credit, happy to take credit. Bibi's blaming it on Biden, saying, "Oh, he made us get out. He threatened us." Others are saying, "No, that's just the excuse you've come up with." So now they're going to turn their attention to Gaza, the West Bank, and Iran. They're not going to fight Hezbollah. I don't think this is going to last. I don't see how it lasts. Israel at some point is going to hit back at Hezbollah. They're going to launch an airstrike. They're going to do something that's going to kill some Hezbollah fighters, and Hezbollah is going to strike back, and game will be back on. The problem that Israel's got is it cannot sustain these combat operations. It doesn't have the strategic depth, and it's run up against that. Again, the much vaunted, the highly touted Israeli military capability. Okay, we're 14 months since October 7th, 2023. Fighting Hamas, which is not by any stretch a Pier 1 military force. They're a ragged guerrilla force. They're armed with light weapons. They don't have heavy weapons. And Israel hasn't been able to defeat them. They've done a great job of killing women and children, but they've been unable to defeat Hamas. And there are some who calculate that Israel's hoping that when Trump takes over, that, quote, and this is what doesn't, that the gloves will be taken off. What gloves they talking? They've been off. Biden's been giving Israel everything it needed to kill now upwards of 50,000 men, women, and children, mostly women and children. So it's not like the United States has been saying, "Whoa, hold back there, cowboy. Don't do that." No, the United States has been fully complicit in the genocide. So what we're running up against is Israel's own internal weakness. And we'll see if if Iran follows through on its threat to retaliate. They keep saying they're going to, and I don't know what the delay is, but if they retaliate in the way that I think they're capable of, they could inflict some very serious damage on Israel and Israel's ability to really continue fighting this war is going to be called into question.
Well, I think that Iran needs another meeting with Russia. That seemed to do the trick last time. But
you can't rule out. I mean, you can't rule out the likelihood that Russia's been counseling Iran. Hold your fire. Let's because Russia prefers. They've always tried to find a diplomatic way out. I should.
True.
Let me see. Let me see if I could find this email I received last night from this ardent Zionist. This guy's crazy. I know him, but I want to read it because it'll give you some insight into just how crazy these people are and what their thinking is. Come on here. It didn't open up. Oh well. But he starts off by saying, well, Iran is now completely isolated. And it's just Israel is going to be triumphing and destroying it in a heartbeat. And I'm like, are you paying attention? Iran has just signed a military agreement with Russia. Iran conducts annual military exercises with China. Iran is now a full-fledged member of BRICS. Iran has got relationships now with Saudi Arabia, along with India, South Africa, and Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, what do you mean isolated? This has nothing to do with isolation. And here I found it, because I think it's important that the people hear how this person writes, because he reflects the Zionist mentality, how they view the world, and it shows you how out of touch with reality. He says, quote, now Iran is isolated. They have no air defense and no ability to have Hezbollah attack or Hamas. Trump will take out the Houthis and cut off Iran oil and other sanctions. Iran economy now will decline and crash. Russia and China are in no position to help Iran solve this. Trump will use tariffs to get China to be more cooperative with U.S. policies. I continue to contend there will be regime change in Iran in 2 years, one way or the other. The entirety of geopolitics is going to change from U.S. weakness to U.S. economic and military power. She cannot afford war nor confrontation with the U.S. I think Trump will use tariffs to get more cooperative relationship, and in the end, she will find it better to cooperate than to confront.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a technical term for this. It's called batshit crazy. Okay? Out of touch with reality. But that is how they genuinely believe the world is. And so we should, if the people that are listening to you or watching this on your podcast, do not believe that there's some rational thinking going on in either Israel or Washington. It's not rational. It's delusional.
I mean, that read like fan fiction. That was crazy. But I've read so many messages like that. It's just like you have the world and reality over here, and then you have this completely disconnected alternative universe that these people are purporting. It's like they haven't seen the decades-long trends and trajectories with the U.S. empire and collective West and how these different economic relationships have formed. And it's just like they don't provide any evidence, and they discount all of the developments of the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to, one of the things that I found so interesting, you're talking about the Kabuki theater, is both the Biden and Trump administrations were taking credit for the ceasefire deal, which I thought was very funny.
We did that. We did. Look at what we did.
I kind of wanted to know both your thoughts about that, because Biden, it's a 60-day ceasefire, quote unquote, and that will take him just past the inauguration of Trump. And so what kind of strategy do you guys think is behind that? I mean, Larry already said he doesn't think it'll last, but in the hypothetical, if the ceasefire does last the 60 days, what do you think the strategy was for Biden to stretch it out to pass the inauguration?
That's it. Stretch it out so he doesn't have to deal with it.
The mess.
Yeah, leave the mess for Trump to clean up. And candidly, Trump and his team, they don't understand how the world has changed. But I'm using the recent words of both Michael Waltz, his designated national security advisor, and that buffoon, Sebastian Gorka. Good Lord. I mean,
Guy's terrible.
I gotta get a slight Hungarian British accent, and I too can sound like a genius. But he gets
Dr. Larry, call you doctor from now.
He gets to play one on television. His comments the other day that when he said, Putin, you're going to listen. Trump is going to make you the offer, and if you don't accept that, boy, it's going to look like what Biden gave you was peanuts. And I'm going, man, that's $2 billion worth of peanuts. That's a lot of peanuts. There's billions of dollars that were delivered to Ukraine and accomplished what? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But Mr. Gorka needs to be apprised that we're old Mother Hubbard. We've gone to the cupboard and the cupboards are bare. We don't have a lot of inventory there in the warehouses to scoop up and send to anybody. In fact, the commander of U.S. Indo-PACOM just last week was saying, oh my God, we got to stop sending all this crap to Ukraine because it's depriving us. We're depleting. We don't have enough to fight China. The United States is in the grips of a military fever, and we're like in the same way that a 3-year-old kid with a hammer sees everything like a nail and has to be hit. We've gotten to the place that everything in the world, the only way we can resolve it was with military power or economic sanctions. Diplomacy, that's for wimps. No, we're going to do the military solution, and then in the process, we actually solve nothing, but impoverish ourselves, weaken ourselves, and make ourselves worse off, and refuse to accept it. So, yeah, this was Biden's attempt to pass it off to Trump, and the Trump people, I think, are completely unprepared to deal with the new world. The world's changed in the last 4 years they were there.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that analysis. I think it's very convenient for all the parties involved, at least the Biden administration and Israel, right? And in the minds of the Israelis, they probably have a little bit more time. In their minds, the Trump administration might give them even more once they get in. They'll have this time to kind of rebuild, lick their wounds, try and protect their economy for the next couple of months. And then, of course, the Biden administration, it's their opportunity to show, look, we might be starting a nuclear war with Russia, but we were really for peace. But the thing about the Trump administration is it's like we're in to get to Larry's point, because I want to flesh it out a little bit. I feel like we're in very different times now here in 2024 heading into 2025 than we were in 2016, 2017, right? Even then, we had some momentum toward greater power conflict, but we didn't have this strong, unstoppable momentum that we have today, where we have major wars that are already unfolding. And in some ways, the first Trump administration, I think, was pretty lucky that we had our involvement in the Middle East was kind of reducing. Things in Ukraine weren't at the fever pitch, of course, that they are today. But now with these neoconservatives that he's lined up, Sebastian Gorka, Marco Rubio, all of these types, I was saying this the other day, that I expect that we will see the full poisonous fruits of neoconservatism come to bear in this next administration. And I think it's incredibly troubling.
Well, Trump is still the decision maker, I believe. We saw that in his first administration. And even though he had those the likes of Mike Pompeo and John Bolton around him, and they tried to thwart him going into North Korea, he still went to North Korea. So Trump's going to do what Trump wants to do. I don't see Gorka or Waltz or Rubio as having any kind of the, if you will, bureaucratic political clout and devilishness that people like Pompeo and Bolton had. I think they're weaker players. Mm-hmm. So Trump and the difference this time compared to 2016, Trump was totally unprepared. I mean, they didn't put a cabinet together until late December, I think. This time they hit the ground running within 2 weeks. Unprecedented. We've never seen anybody in the modern era, going back to FDR, that's assembled a cabinet so quickly. It remains to be seen whether Trump is sincere about what he said on the campaign trail. Either he wants to bring an end to the wars, or he's going to become a tool for spreading it. That if he does the latter, he's going to go the way of George H.W. Bush, who said, "Hey, read my lips, no new taxes," and then raised taxes. Dead. Politically dead.
Yep.
Let me put this way. I want to believe that Trump's not that stupid.
Me too.
And I hope for the sake of our nation that he's not. But I'm also not encouraged. I am encouraged that he put Tulsi Gabbard in proposed slot for Director of National Intelligence. Again, she's the only one to speak up honestly about the nature of the war in Ukraine and what's going on. And as she does so, she gets immediately labeled as a tool of Putin, as someone who's been subverted by the Russians. And that's the problem. You can't so far have anybody make rational proposals about dealing with Russia on a civilized basis. That we have to treat them like they're a leper colony. And this is all from people, who were not around for the Cold War, who don't recall that Richard Nixon sat down with Brezhnev in 1972, even though Brezhnev and the Russians had been arming and using pilots in North Vietnam to kill our pilots. I mean, they'd been directly involved. We still found a way to talk to the Soviets. Current crowd, Biden hasn't talked to the Russians, and Trump wasn't talking to the Russians. So, it is, and these Russians are not communists. They're not like the bad old guys that were there prior to 1989. So it is, Trump has a historic opportunity to maybe walk us away from our own destruction. Yeah, it is, from the West standpoint, there's only nukes. We either go conventional military or nukes. Russia now has, we can go nukes as an ultimate last resort, but we now got this middle ground, we call it Oreshnik, that we can really do some damage to you, particularly in Europe. And the irony here is that the emergence of this Oreshnik missile is indirectly Donald Trump's fault, because it was Trump in 2018 that walked away from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, the INF agreement, which prohibited the development of this kind of weapon. Trump says no, but for pressure from Pompeo and Bolton, no, you're violating it, so we're not going to abide by it either. And Russia goes, okay, boom, they build the Oreshnik. Now, every country in Europe faces a threat. And again, you two are too young to remember when I entered on duty in CIA in September of 1985. The first intelligence we were shown was about Soviet efforts to block the introduction of Pershing II missiles into Europe. All the European peace groups that were protesting the arrival of Pershing II. But why were the Pershing IIs coming in? Because the Europeans were scared to death that Russia's or the Soviet Union's intermediate range ballistic missiles could hit them. And we didn't have anything to hit back with. So we needed those Pershing IIs. Well, guess what? Here we are now, 40 years later. It's actually 38 years since the signing of that agreement. And Russia's back with an intermediate nuclear capable missile that can hit anywhere in Europe. And the Europeans don't have a single thing to defend against it. They don't have an air defense system that can stop it. So back to the future.
Well, now that we have something of a ceasefire in name working through Lebanon, we have a kind of a lull in activity in Gaza, probably just for the simple fact that there's not a lot left there to blow up. So, of course, our besties in northern Syria have to start acting up. The Turks and al-Nusra Front 2.0, which is HTS Hayat something al-Sham. I always forget the middle word, but so they're just basically a regrouping of al-Nusra Front. They've started pushing around western Aleppo. I kind of wanted to know your thoughts on this. Why now? Why? And Turkish artillery, it's Turkish army is firing upon the Syrian Arab army. Why now? What's going on? What should we look for? Russians have been killed. I think one Russian soldier was killed today. What's going on in that area? I ask you because of your former employer is very well very much in control.
Sarah, you're not suggesting, are you, any possibility that the United States could have helped instigate this and encourage HTS to launch an offensive?
I would
My
never.
God, why do you hate America?
I would never say that.
No, she was insinuating Israel and being
so
We're the same thing.
Yeah, well, again, Syria is just another example of how the United States has been a force for evil around the world. And people say, well, why do I hate America? America to me has become like the neighborhood pedophile that's walking around molesting all the kids in the neighborhood. We need to be locked away, locked up, and put down. We've got to stop this endless meddling and promotion. We used to think or claim in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 that we were fighting against Islamic extremism. And yes, we should fight against this ISIS crowd that insists on a global caliphate that is going to be imposed by force. That's something the Russians oppose too. In fact, if we were serious about fighting that kind of terrorist threat, we would join forces with Russia and work with Syria to kill it, to destroy it. But that's not what we're doing. My old outfit, the CIA, I guarantee, has been helping provide weapons and training to these people, and if not funding. And so it's designed to promote conflict. This is generating and increasing tensions between Turkey and Syria. That's exactly what we want. We don't want Turkey and Syria working together. We can't have that. That's why in the early 1980s, the United States was providing funding, weapons to both Iran and Iraq so that they could fight each other and kill each other. That's who we are. We are this malevolent influence in the world going around trying to incite unrest and instability. We don't want people to come together and sing Kumbaya. We don't want that, because that's not profitable for the military-industrial complex. And it certainly would weaken our position in the world, because we want to be in control. We want to tell these people what to do, and they better damn well do what we say, or we're going to impose sanctions, or we're going to launch a color revolution, or we may even go to war with them. That's how sick we've become. And the number, I think the growing number of Americans are going, we don't want that. That's not us. We want something different. But this sudden eruption, I don't believe in coincidence. Not at all. I think this is part of a broader plan within the deep state to create as much chaos as they can to hopefully weaken Trump. Because let's come back to remember the rationale for allowing Ukraine to fire ATACMS missiles into Russian territory was the North Koreans. My God, those North Korean troops,
secret weapon.
They're in Russia. And it's like, okay, let's stop for a minute. North Korea and Russia have had military relations for 75 years, so it's not a news flash. But those Koreans are out in the eastern part of Russia. They're not back west. But the rationale that was presented by David Sanger, October 8th, in the New York Times, oh, Russia suffered such catastrophic losses, lie, that it's had to call upon help from North Korea, lie. And the North Korean troops are in there fighting, which represents a threat to Europe. Lie. And so because of that lie, the United States says, we better give them these ATACMS missiles. ignoring the fact that the attack of missiles that Ukraine launched had been in country since April. They've been there for 6 months. It wasn't like they were suddenly deployed. This is all a scam. So you've got that scam. Then you got the scam, the Iranians tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Really? How'd that happen? Well, on November 8th, the FBI put out this indictment of this guy named Farhad Shakeri. Shakeri was born in Afghanistan in 1973. Emigrated with his family when he was like 6 or 7 years old, 1979, 1980, to New York City. Never became a citizen. Committed armed robbery, got put in prison in New York for 14 years. Gets out of prison in 2008 because he's not a U.S. citizen. They put his butt on a plane, sent him back to Afghanistan. No word of Shakeri for 11 years. Then all of a sudden in 2019, he's in Sri Lanka. He gets busted with 92 kilos of heroin. That's a big load. Well, guess what? You don't get picked up like that without DEA being involved. And DEA was involved. DEA was the one that flagged that shipment to the Sri Lankan police. And so, does Farhad Shakeri get lined up against the wall and shot? Oh, no. Does he go to prison? No. It was his lucky day. Monty Hall was there. Farhad, let's make a deal. And Farhad got to make a deal with the United States to be what they call a cooperator. And the CIA gets involved at some point. And so Farhad Shakeri, an Afghan armed robber, convicted in prison, and also now a drug trafficker, somehow makes his way to Iran to work in the oil and gas industry. Now, you know those Iranians, all that Shia Muslim stuff, they're really cool about drug traffickers and people that committing armed robbery. They can't wait to have them all come into their country. And so then this guy claims, and he claims this, mind you, in a telephone call, the FBI calls him in Tehran. Hello, Farhad. Yes, I hear. I have been recruited by the IRGC. And the IRGC, guy named Soleimani of all things, asked me to kill this American Iranian guy. This thing is such a load of crap that was presented to create the meme. Again, Iran's trying to kill Trump. The North Koreans are attacking us. Oh my God, we've got to go to war. This is all narrative driven. It's entirely fabricated. Now, I'm not saying that these aren't real people. They're real people. And some of the events are real. But the narrative is all constructed. And that includes what's going on now in Syria. That all of a sudden HTS is, hey, baby, we're back. And we're ready to go.
Well, I have a little game I want to play. It's a clip. And it'll tie everything. It ties the whole episode together. Speaking of meddling, we have visitors in Syria. If you notice, the blue and yellow armbands are Syrian freedom fighters. Have been in at least in correspondence or close contact with Ukrainians. We have heard rumors of Ukrainians inside of Syria as well as the Sahel. What are your thoughts on this, both of you guys? I kind of want to touch on this red line, throwback to Seymour Hersh. People forget that how tied into each other these things are, and these routes are used for weapons, human trafficking, organs, and all of the like, and they go everywhere, all the way to Turkestan and China and all the way up north into the Balkans. So kind of wanted to touch on how they all kind of tie together.
Well, those are the smart Ukrainians. They figure they got a better chance of surviving if they go fight in Syria as opposed to Ukraine. In Ukraine, the Russians are going to kill them. And it also highlights that the role of the United Kingdom, MI6, have been heavily involved in both Syria and Ukraine, so they can easily move assets from one place to the other. And you're right to recall the, size article, Red Line, Rat Line. I helped him with that way back in the day.
Of course you did.
Without divulging how I helped. But we saw early on, and this is all about weakening Iran. So the civil war in Syria was initiated and encouraged by the United States and by the UK to weaken Syria in order to go after Iran. And that's continued throughout the years. So the United States has no intention of trying to promote peace there. And by bringing the Ukrainians in, and or they've also tried to use some of the fighters in Syria, ship them up to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
I think they wised up. They weren't that keen on getting their jihad on up in the Donetsk, because the Russians actually can fight in a way that they've never experienced down south. So this is, but I think your point with this and bringing in Syria is that everyone step back and take a look at the broader picture. The United States is trying to create global chaos and trying to suck Iran and Russia and China into as many different wars to weaken them as if possible. And the ones who are actually weakening themselves are us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah. The character of these organizations is always strikingly similar too, right? Whether we're talking about the Azov battalion, whether we're talking about these kind of radical Islamists in the Caucasus who were crucial to the Crocus Music Hall attacks, whether we're talking about the Syrian Free Army or Islamic militants in Sahel trying to undermine the emerging sovereignty of these West African nations. And they all take kind of a similar character, right? Where it's these groups reject the predominant or emerging social order, or like civilizational state of being in these societies. And sometimes it's religious extremism, sometimes it's ethnic hatred, sometimes it's language or religion, religious divisions that motivate these types of extremists. But they're always utilized in very similar ways. And they kind of have a similar, they have a similar character to them, where a lot of times there's a disregard for civilian life, and furtherance of these like either hyper nationalist or religious extremist objectives that are all kind of tied in to this goal that the United States has to stop, in my view, what is the emerging multipolar world, these different civilizational orders and bonds of sociality kind of coming into being, uniting these bigger blocks of nations and their kind of historical existence. So I see a lot of similarities here.
Yeah, I say go back. Look, let's go back to the aftermath of World War II. But the United States and the United Kingdom started organizing guerrilla forces from the Bandera folks.
Yep.
To go in and try to both take over Ukraine and then ultimately just destroy Russia.
Mm-hmm.
That was the goal. They failed. 2003, again, the Chechen terrorists, that attacked at Beslan, that killed, upwards of, 500 people. That was, U.S. was helping fund that, train those Islamic extremists. We've had this dream of, it wasn't about fighting communism. That's how it was sold in the 1950s and 1960s. Well, what's our excuse in 2000? Because Russia is no longer a communist country. It's a Christian country, largely Eastern Orthodox Christian. What this is all about, we want their resources. We want to control their gold, their oil, their uranium, their natural gas, their nickel, their aluminum, their nitrogen. We want it all. Belongs to us. It's greed. It is Western greed driving this. It has nothing to do about democracy or freedom. Those are lies that are being told to the West. And so what really pisses us off in the West is that Putin refuses to bend over and become someone's prison bitch. No, he's not going to do it. Sorry about that.
Wasn't ready for that. I just wasn't ready.
Yeah, but I mean that's really what it is. The West is out of control, and now that you've got the global South rising up, I had a conversation with Pepe Escobar earlier today. Pepe and I, we're about the same age, and we're like kindred spirits. And and I asked him to verify for me, because my impression, having been around Russians when they're around Africans, Asians, and people from Latin America, it's an entirely different vibe you get than when official Washington, U.S. diplomats are around Africans, Asians, and Central South Americans. The West comes off with this patronizing attitude, pat the little brown people on the head. You don't really take them seriously. You don't treat them as equals, certainly. The one thing that I've noticed out of the BRICS countries, and you particularly pick it up with the Russians, they aren't pretending. They genuinely treat these people from Africa and Asia and South America as equals. They treat them not as inferiors. They treat them as equals. And those people sense that. And they understand that Russia isn't coming with an agenda of, we're going to ensnare you so you do what we want. That Russia and China actually are saying, can we create a world where nobody's going around telling everybody else what to do? And that we can interact on a normal basis without having to arm ourselves to the teeth? And it's in contrast to the United States and Western Europe. I mean, Western Europe is used to having those Africans, hey, Hakeem, bring me my slippers, or wiper, I need the wiper in here in the bathroom,
Yeah.
That the West can't break itself from that colonial hegemonist mentality. And that's where Russia and China are saying, no, there's a different way. And people say, oh, they're trying to take over the world. Well, guess what? They don't have 750 military bases between them in each of their countries, much less around the world. If, what I'd love to see, and it's never going to happen, Donald Trump on day one walk in and say, you know what? I want to send a message to Russia and to China. We don't want to be enemies. We want to be friends. And as a indicator of that, I'm ordering the immediate closure of 400 U.S. military bases overseas. Boys and girls, come home. We're shutting those down. We're going to move away from a war footing. We'd like to be on a diplomatic footing. Not going to happen, but I can dream.
We still need to break out of that heart of darkness mentality, right?
Yeah.
Where we're the good ones giving virtue to these backwards people. And in fact, it's usually the opposite. And it's funny enough, it took a Russian, Joseph Conrad, to actually illuminate that and originally point that out. And that it's one of my favorite books. And I think about it often as we're going through this era.
The bad guy in that was Kurtz, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So when I went through the farm, when we did paramilitary training at CIA, one of the instructors, that was his name, Kurtz.
That's great. Yeah. The station manager.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because the Russians have never had that. I mean, even historically, have never had that experience. In particular with Africa, they were really the only major European power that didn't take part in the partition and enslavement.
No, that's a book I could write. Russia's colonial conquest. And I could write it because it'd be very short. You open it up, it'd be like a couple of blank pages. That's it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, Larry. We have some super chats. So one of our, I think I know the answer to this, but one of our listeners, Nick M, did Russia give the U.S. a heads up on the Oreshnik's launch?
Oh yeah, and they've promised the next ones too. We're telling you, it's I've called it. It's a cross between the Billy Jack and Babe Ruth moment. The Babe Ruth called the shot. those of you who aren't, American baseball fans, back in the 1930s, Babe Ruth, this famous home run hitter, stood up and pointed to center field and said, I'm hitting the ball out there. And he did. So that's what, Russia's going to let us know in advance because they don't want to trigger a nuclear war. They said, we're launching. There are no nukes on board. And this is where we're going to hit. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Good luck. I mean, that is, that's a new level. We've never seen this before like this. Russia never had a weapon that it could unleash that the United States wouldn't have some chance of stopping. Now, no chance of stopping it.
We want to thank you again, Larry. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. Today was a record, a YouTube record. So, Larry, thank you for helping us set a live stream record. Guys, please like, share, and subscribe the YouTube channel. We are back from a ban. And please visit all of Larry's platforms, Sonar21.com and Telegram Sonar21 as well. Please visit the website. All merchandise is shipping free to everywhere, and consider supporting us on Ko-fi.com. We have 2 trips coming up, one to a secret location we can't reveal yet, and the other one to Iraq after the new year. So please find it in your hearts. And if we don't see you, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.